Welcome back, friends. Dan Vega here, and today we're talking about Spring Boot 3.1 RC1. This was just released, and there are some really great features in there, but I want to talk about one in particular. This is the ability to use Docker Compose files. Now, this is not something new. You can always create a Docker Compose file in your application, use it, Docker Compose up, all the containers start, and go ahead and run your application against it. But there are some really nice features in this that we'll get into in the demo. One of which is that Spring Boot Docker Compose module will start and stop your containers automatically. The other big one is that you don't need to duplicate properties that are in that Docker Compose file over to something like application.properties. So this is going to be a lot of fun, just a tiny little feature, but I'm really excited. I get really excited about these little enhancements. And I think I'm not even going to call it little. This is a big enhancement for me. I like this a lot. And I think you will too, but I think the proof is in the pudding. After you see the demo, maybe you'll be as excited as me. So what are we waiting for? Let's write some code. All right, so here we are on the Spring Initializer. I'm going to choose Maven as my build tool 3.0.6. I'm going to go, I'm going to choose 3.1.0 RC1. Again, we are talking about Spring Boot 3.1, Dan. So let's say dev.danvega. We'll call this DC for Docker Compose. I'm going to use Java 17, and I'm going to add a couple of dependencies. I'm going to choose web. I'm also going to choose Spring Data JPA, and I'm also going to need a database. In this instance, we're going to use Postgres. So I'm going to grab the Postgres SQL driver, and that should be enough. Now, again, we don't need to set up Postgres. We'll use a Docker Compose file to go ahead and define that Docker container, and Spring Boot is automatically going to spin that up for us. So we're going to go ahead and generate that. It's going to create a zip file for us. I'm going to open this up in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate Edition. That is my favorite IDE, but you should open this up in whatever text editor, IDE, AI assistant, whatever you want to use, whatever you're most productive in, please go ahead and open up in that. And with that, let's go ahead and write some code. All right, so I'm going to get started here. If you've been following me, you know I like to rename this to just application. I'm strange like that, but that's okay. We all have our little quirks, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a new class. Let's create a new Java class in the model package called post. This is going to be a class and not a record because we are using Spring Data JPA here, and records are immutable. So let's go ahead and say we need an integer for ID. We need just a string for title of our post. And we need a string for the body of our post. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that with @ID and @generated_value. We're going to need to create all the things here. So the first thing we'll create is a noarg constructor. We'll also go ahead and create a constructor to take in the title and the body. We're going to go ahead and generate the getters and setters. Let's see. And then let's go ahead and get a toString in there as well. And all of that fun. And we are finally done creating a simple data class. Thank you, records. I wish I could use them in JPA. Okay, with that done, now I'm going to create a repository. So I'm going to create a new class in the repository package. We'll call this post repository. And this is going to be an interface that extends Dan. The list CRUD repository. This is a post, and the ID type is integer. Okay, we're getting there. Let's go ahead and create a new controller. So I'm going to say controller.postController, right? And this is a REST controller with a request mapping of /API/posts. I'm going to create a get mapping. This is going to return a list of the posts. So we'll say list of posts, find all, and this is going to return the repositories. Now, what's the repository? So I want to auto wire that in, and I want to go ahead and call find all. So we have a post controller, a post repository. We are getting there. We need a way to go ahead and set up a database now, right? This is where our Docker Compose is going to come in. So we're going to create a new Java file, and I'm going to say docker-compose. Now you want to look in the documentation. This is looking for very specific files. So docker-compose.yml.yaml, and I think compose and compose.yaml and compose.yaml as well. So it's looking for some specific file names, but this is in the project root, so it is going to go ahead and find it. So now we just need to work on our Docker Compose file. So we're going to use version 3.1. We're going to say our services. We're going to have a DB. And the image for that is going to be Postgres. Again, if this is kind of new to you, we're getting some nice IntelliSense there from IntelliJ, so that's really great. But we're just using a Docker container here. So this is, if you go out to Docker Hub and take a look for all the available containers, we're using basically the latest version of Postgres. We want to say restart always. We got to map some ports, so I'm going to say that 5432 on the host is going to be mapped to, 5432 on the container. And then we need to set up some environment variables. So environment, we're going to say Postgres username. That is going to be Postgres. We're going to say Postgres password. That is going to be password. And we're going to say Postgres DB, and that is going to be blog. All right, so with that in place, let's talk about what happens in an existing application, right? So in an existing application, I'd have to go into resources, application.properties, and fill out a bunch of properties about how to connect to a data source. Now, thankfully, Spring Boot makes this pretty minimal, but after I'm done with that, then I would go ahead and run my application, and I would find out, oh, no, I can't connect to my database. Right now, that's because we haven't filled anything out in application.properties. But even if I did, in a normal application flow, it's because I didn't run Docker Compose up on my Docker Compose file or click the little green play button in my IDE, which makes everything easier. So because that's not ready yet, then my application doesn't work yet. All right, so Spring Boot is going to help us with both of these, but not right out of the box. And this isn't something you can pick from the Spring Initializer yet. It's not there yet. This is still a release candidate. But how do we fix this now? Well, we can go in our pom.xml. And what we're going to do here is add a new dependency. So this dependency is going to be Spring Boot Docker Compose. And this is going to come from org.springframework.boot. I'm going to go ahead and save that and refresh this. Okay, so we're almost there. We have this Docker Compose file. When we run our application, Spring is now going to start that up for us. There are some properties that you could set if you don't like the out-of-the-box configuration. So go ahead and take a look at the release notes for that. But there's one more thing I got to do. I got to come in here and I got to set my JPA to generate my DDL for me because that is not going to do that automatically. So I got my Docker Compose file. I have my application. Let's go ahead and run our application and see if this works. So you can see now that we get the logging information in the console there telling us what's going on. So let's look at this. And what it did was, I'm going to go ahead and remove me. So what it did here was, it says found Docker Compose file. So we know that it found that file. And now it's going through and creating that container for us. Everything's good to go. Tomcat's initialized. Hey, all of our data is working. Things are looking good. Started the application. So this is good. This tells me that we're probably doing the right thing. Let's go ahead and just create a single record so we can see it in the database. Let's go ahead and create a new bean. We'll create a command line runner here, and this will take in the post repository, and this is going to return args, and we'll say our repository.save. We'll say a new post. We just need a title and a body, so hello world, and then the body is my first blog post, right? So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and rerun our application. And if we head over to the browser and go to localhost 8080/API/posts, we see our new post. All right, that's it. A short one today, but a sweet one. That is Spring Boot 3.1 RC1, one of the new features in this release. There are a few new features that I'm really excited about, this being one of them. A big fan of just that developer experience and starting and stopping my containers for me and not having to duplicate properties. I love it. Thank you, Spring team, for this welcomed addition. If you found some value in this, do me a favor, friends. Thumbs up. That would be very helpful. Subscribe to the channel. And as always, happy coding.
There we go.